Welcome back into another episode of George in the Jungle, presented by Remington Tavern. As always, Remington Tavern can be found at 8892 Glendale Milford Road, 45140, where they have their daily happy hour from 3 to 7 p.m., $5 bourbon whiskey Wednesdays, bottle cap bonanza Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. You can find them on Instagram at RemyTavCincy. That's REMITAV Cincy with a Y, or follow them on Facebook. And with that, George, it was a rough weekend for for any football fan of Cincinnati's collegiate and professional teams here in the city.
Yeah, both games did not play out very well for the home fans. Late Saturday night out in Colorado, then Sunday afternoon at Paycor, and there were, I guess, in some ways, some similarities there in the way they lost. But getting to the Bearcats first and losing 34-23, and it was what I feared when they went up against Colorado. And it's, I definitely had fear that those receivers would be able to have their way with the UC secondary, and that happened. Shedeur Sanders picked a heck of a time to be red hot, finishing 25 of 30 or something like that. It seemed like he hit like his first however many passes. And then on the flip side, UC's receivers didn't look like they could get open to me.
He was 25 of 30. He was. But I would venture to say of those 25, 8-ish were behind the line of scrimmage and were just receivers doing what receivers do in space. So it's
which is a good game plan for them against Cincinnati.
Sure. I guess my point is just it's a little bit of a skewed number. He's not airing the ball out all over the place, and he granted he did hit some shots. Don't get me wrong.
He had some nice throws. I in fact, and I've seen him play before, but I don't know that I've seen him play like this before. It just seemed like he was pretty much on across the board to me.
Yeah, it was what you did not want to see happen. It was pretty much the worst of the worst. They never really, in spurts, Colorado got their run game going, but it was largely through the air and run and catch.
Yep.
Catch and run and catch. Do all of the things with ball in space. And truthfully, I was jealous.
Right. No, I get it. Those are terrific players, terrific skilled players. And they've shored up their lines a lot better this year than what they had last year. I mean, they were a sieve last year. I think UC got one sack, and, Sanders is going to be able to move a little bit, but still you've got to harass him more than what UC was able to. And that's kind of been a problem with the Bearcats all year, getting pressure on these quarterbacks and making them a little more uncomfortable than what they are. And they really haven't been able to do that a whole lot this year. And they certainly didn't do it Saturday night. And we saw what the result was. But all of that still, you feel like if the end of that first half, and we've said this before, if the end of that first half would have played out a little differently, could have been a little different ball game. But that was just a horrible turnaround, and it seems like it happens every game to UC. The end of the first half is just a nightmare for them.
Yeah, it's been like four or five different games. And crazy enough, I believe this was the first game that they did not have the lead at halftime.
Yes, that is correct. That was the first time they had trailed at the half all season, which when I heard that surprised me, but then it's like, well, yeah, you think back to each of the games and, and they didn't get blown out in this one. They were right there and still even had a chance in the fourth quarter. I mean, they were hanging on by their fingernails, but they still had a chance, after they kicked that field goal and you're down 8, if you could make something happen. And they just weren't able to do it, but credit Colorado. I mean, they got some really, really good players. And while Sanders had a great game, so did Travis Hunter. I mean, he showed what he's all about and why he's so highly coveted at the next level, and he made some terrific plays. And one that never should have happened though was the one at the end of the first half. I just I don't understand how you're that late in that situation with the time on the clock, and you're letting wide receivers run past you, and two of them got past the top of the defense, and I don't know how one of them does, and that was just really, really, really poor. And then backing up prior to that, I wasn't a big fan, and Satterfield explained the fourth down call and having the empty backfield, and that Colorado had given up a couple plays like that on fourth down this year, and they thought they could do the same. And if Sorsby goes right, he may have a chance to get that first down. I think he does, but he didn't. They stacked up the middle of the line, and quite honestly, I mean, when you're in the empty like that, you only got one option to look for, right? When you're a guy firing off the line, there's one guy you got to worry about, and that's what they did.
I hated the call. And Chad went on to say his piece about it when we discussed it. He didn't mind the call, and of course, hindsight is always going to be 2020.
Right.
But truthfully, I mean, Kiner did not struggle to run the ball the entire game. More often than not, I mean, I can't recall many plays where he got stopped at or around or behind the line of scrimmage. So I didn't love not putting the ball in his hands. I understand that if he's back there, you're probably going to be targeting in on him, at which point maybe you call an RPO.
Right.
But you gave yourself no option when you call an empty backfield and you're running the ball with Sorsby. But
yeah, and I wasn't crazy mad about that after I heard coach's explanation and what their thought process was. So it's not like I'm, like everybody else running around going, what an idiot. Why would you ever do that? There was sound reasoning for doing it. It didn't work. I still don't know that I would be satisfied with doing that and just having that one option on that play, especially when you have a guy that excels in short yardage like Corey does. So right. I definitely wasn't in love with it. I probably wouldn't have done it, but I understand a little more where they were coming from, because at the time I'm like, holy crap, you got to be kidding me.
Well, and we're allowed to be, especially when you see what happens right after that, as Colorado goes and scores right before the half, you're especially allowed to be upset about it, even more so by the result that came after you don't get the fourth down. So it is what it is. Look, coaches called fourth down for the most part up until Colorado, and even the one fourth down that they went for in the last game. He was perfect before those three. Right. But now you've missed on three of your last, I believe, three of your last four. So 1 for 3 in this game. Third down was real bad for Cincinnati in this game as well. 3 of 10. They've got to figure some things out in this game. Your long pass. Evan Pryor had 40. Tony Johnson had 22. But they have the 40 by Pryor came on a run and catch.
Correct.
Catch and run.
Yes.
Get the order right. But they've struggled to really get anything going on any type of medium to long pass. I guess you can say they've had some mediums there, but nothing long.
No, it's been a struggle for several games now.
3-4 games, right?
And they've got to get that figured out. And Colorado probably wasn't the team to figure it out against, because they're pretty strong back there, and they blanketed UC's guys. I mean, that's just a bad matchup for the Cats on that night.
Trying to do it against Iowa State, I don't know is going to necessarily be any better. The only saving grace you have is you have a bye week before playing Iowa State. However, Iowa State also has a bye week.
Well, how does that schedule shake out? Why am I thinking there's West Virginia coming up too?
You're right. You're right. You do have West Virginia before Iowa State.
Yeah, the reason I was
West
just sitting
Virginia.
here a little bit ago thinking I may not be able to go to that game because I'm getting that darn surgery. But we'll see what kind of shape I'm in 4 days after having that surgery. Hopefully, I can go. But
West Virginia is the team that also has the bye week. I'm sorry about that. That is my mistake.
okay.
Thank you for the correction. Thank you for the correction. Looks like
That's a game. That's a game they have to win. And they're looking for bowl eligibility and could have gotten it Saturday night. Instead, Colorado did. But it would be nice to get that out of the way against West Virginia because you're right. I think they have Iowa State, a game out there right after the following week, right. and that's going to be tough. They're playing very well.
And it doesn't get necessarily much easier against Kansas State right after that. You have two ranked teams right in a row. So hopefully you can use West Virginia as a get-right game. West Virginia's been hot and cold all season, standing at, I believe, 4-4 right now, a game behind Cincinnati, but it's the Big 12, and truthfully, anything can happen week to week. Who knows?
And it's definitely that kind of conference. And I must say, these Saturdays, though, are kind of fun. Even though I had to wait all day and half the night for UC to kick off, but you've got conference action from noon till past midnight now. The way they're running these games, it's awesome. I mean, I'm never in need of action on a Saturday right now, at least relevant action to UC in that conference. It's on all day long. It's great.
It's bananas.
It really is. It's pretty fun.
What do you think that this team needs to be focused in on as they do approach a bye week here this week? And I don't want to say that they're struggling yet. You had one game where you lost against a Colorado team that's been surging.
Right.
But I don't know. This team's certainly not firing on all cylinders right now.
No, and they got to figure that pass thing out, and some of it could be, protection issues too. But they've got to get the ball downfield a little more and hopefully open things up for that ground game even more than what they have it now. So they definitely have to look at that. And I'm sure they're doing a lot of self-analyzing and self-scouting right now to figure out what those issues are and fix them. And I still feel there's got to be a little more. They got to figure out some pressure on these opposing quarterbacks. These guys can't just be back there for 8-9 seconds running around, either, able to make a play with their feet and bust out of the contain or throw the ball downfield because your guys can't cover that long. Nobody can. So they got to get that figured out too. And it's not killing them. It's really not, because when you look at all these scores are within reason. But a couple plays here and a couple plays there make a big difference, and that's where they're kind of getting beat right now.
And if you do get back to the quarterback, make sure that you don't open hand slap a guy in his helmet. Because that's 15.
You can't do that. That was kind of a weak call, but by the letter of the law, I guess that's what the rule is, and that was very unfortunate. That came at a bad time too. That did not help. But the big thing in that game was just that turnaround at the end of the first half again. And it's just, I mean, what was that score? They were down 3 when they had the ball at the end of the half, and then they go in down 10 or something, if I remember right. It's just too big of a turnaround, man. It's too big. You're thinking you're going to have a shot to tie the game, if not take the lead, because I think they still had all 3 timeouts when they were going into that 4th down, and then all of a sudden you're looking at the 10-point deficit. So that's just too big of a turnaround to overcome, really. The way that game was going, the way they were having trouble moving the ball, especially through the air.
When you also didn't have many possessions to really work with. Each team only had 4 possessions in the first half. It was just I described it this way, and you can disagree if you'd like. I called it a slog of a game. I thought it was, honestly, for as late as it was not a very action-filled game. I was bored. I found myself bored through a majority of the game. And then as it got later, I got angrier that I had to stay up and watch the game in order to be able to talk about it all week.
You weren't holding out hope. I was holding out hope till the very,
I was tired.
I know. I was too.
These kids were running me ragged, George.
I was too, and I had a big Friday night, so you can imagine how full of pep I was on Saturday because I was. I'm not sure I got off that couch more than 3 times all day. It was, but I can't say I ever got bored in that game because I just felt like something could happen at any minute with the players that Colorado had on the field, and again, like I said before, it just felt like hanging on by the fingernails for a long time in that game, and then it finally gave loose. It was a shame, but
well, even then, you were still
not lost.
Yeah, you were still within a score with 4 minutes left in the game, so it wasn't as if this was an ass beating. It wasn't as if not a drubbing or anything like that. I didn't ever feel like Colorado had run away with the game or anything. It was just slow action to me.
Yeah, and I was also fine with UC going for that 2-point conversion when they did, as opposed to then you put all the pressure on the last one. If you don't get it there, you can still tie with the next one. I get that too. I was fine with that, and I don't know that anybody had a problem with it, but it was a little something to think about. But I agree with what they did there.
Well, like we said, you got a bye week, then you got West Virginia. Hopefully, this offense can get things figured out. I know you mentioned the protection, and this team may or may not have Luke Kandra, the preseason All Big 12 offensive lineman. That's a big loss if you're going to be missing Luke Kandra. This poor offensive line has not really seen its expected entirety that was supposed to be the returning 5 from last season. Right. You've not gotten to see really what this team expected to put out there at any point in time throughout this whole season.
No, they've been dealing with injuries from day one, it seems like, on that line, and haven't been able to get everybody out there together, at least not very much. Not enough even to work out all the kinks amongst each other and feel like a unit. So that's hampered them this year. There's no doubt about that, and every team goes through injuries and all of that, but hopefully this one, the Kandra, is not a bad injury. I know it probably didn't look good if they said he was carted off at the end, and he'd been hurt earlier in the game and went off but came back in to play. So I don't know if any of that's related or what, but I just hope like heck that guy's healthy, because you don't want to lose any of them, but you certainly don't want to lose your number one dog there.
Well, we'll see what the team's able to get back in order before West Virginia, and I don't know. You got plenty of time to try and get some guys rested, recuperated, rehabbed, whatever the case may be, before kickoff in about a week and a half. So we'll see what this team can do.
I mean, I expect them to dig down, come back, play well against West Virginia. It seems like it's that kind of team, because you look over the course of a game where, they've had a lot of adversity in these games, and they had plenty on Saturday night, but they still seem to hang in there, and they don't go away. They don't go away. They keep coming at you, and I like that aspect of this team. But that's just, oh man, a win out there would have been huge, but didn't happen.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Yep.
That said, the other team that played that we alluded to earlier in this show, the Bengals played the Eagles at home and dropped another home game. The team is now 0-4 at home. They lost 37-17, and it feels like Zach Taylor going for it on 4th down at their own 40-yard line or so was an anomaly for the entire season. It was poor coaching decision. It was not doing enough. It was bad play call. It was gross. All of it. I hated the call. I hated going for it there. It was unnecessary. And it feels like, to me, that's a fireable offense.
That was not a good look. It was not a good look. And when they go out and they go to run this play, and then Chase starts his motion thing going one way, back the other, back. I'm just like, well, they're going to
Going to
try to get
Chase.
the ball to him, right?
Yep.
And the Eagles had two guys waiting on him over there in the flat. One inside, one out, and they did a good job defending that, but it wasn't that hard to do. You knew what was going on at that point. At least I felt like I did, and that's what happened. I'm sure the Eagles were thinking the same thing. And you're right. It was unnecessary to go for that. And then if you are, that's the play you have, and you're getting the ball to a guy passing to him behind the line of scrimmage. And I didn't like that at all either. And that really, really, really made a big difference in that ball game. I mean, it's just, the Bengals were having trouble stopping the Eagles. That's the only thing I can think, like in Zach's head. It's like, my God, we haven't been stopping them. But still, at that spot on the field, you got a kid who's punting the crap out of the ball. I see why you were that upset about it and would call it a fireable offense, because it didn't add up. The pros did not outweigh the cons, and they got the ultimate con on that when they got stopped. And then, the Eagles just had their way from there the rest of the game.
You were only down 7, and if you don't have confidence that your defense can get the job done, which is why you're going for it, by the way,
right?
Why in the hell would you force your defense to be on a short field? None of it made sense. You're only down 7.
Pretty much guaranteed you were allowing points in that situation, going down 2 scores instead of 1 by doing that. And I can't defend it. I really can't defend it.
At the very least, if I'm Mike Brown, if I'm one of the Blackburns, whoever is in charge of managerial decisions at this point in time, because I truly have no idea. They keep everything kind of behind closed doors in that regard. But whoever has these talks with Zach Taylor needed to call Zach Taylor into their office that night after the game. You don't wait until Tuesday morning. You don't let him sit on it. You let him sit on the conversation that you have with him. And it's time for you to relinquish these offensive play calling. And if you don't believe that the offensive coordinator that you hired can make these calls, then you hired the wrong guy.
I would agree. I can't argue with that. And I know he, is continuing to wanting to call all those plays and everything, but it seems like more and more in these tight situations and these close situations, it's not working. And then they're off to a horrendous start. When you're 0-4 or whatever it is at home, and I mean, they do you have confidence? I know Burrow said after the game it's doable to win 7 of their last 9 to get the 10
What else
win.
is he supposed to say?
Well, I know.
There's nothing else he can say.
I don't know that it's doable. I know this
I don't either.
He heats up. And yes, you're right. He has to say that. But when I'm sitting there listening to that, and then you do look, if you look at what's left on the schedule, it is doable. I'm not saying they will, but they do have how many games? So 9 games. Probably 5 of those games at least are going to be against teams with winning records, right?
4 of them are against AFC North teams. And those are never easy games. 2 of them.
Well, at Baltimore on Thursday night is going to be good luck winning that. Good luck winning that the way Baltimore's going right now.
Well, and you have Pittsburgh twice.
Right.
I don't see 7 games. I don't
think
see it.
Denver has a winning record. Who else? There's somebody else in there that probably does. God, I can't remember what the Chargers are offhand. But it's not. It is doable, though. I agree with that. It's doable.
You got the Ravens at 5-3. You got the Ravens at 5-3. You got the Chargers at 4-3. You've got the Steelers at 6-2. Then you've got the Cowboys at 3-4. You've got the Titans at 1-6. The Browns at 2-6. The Broncos at 5-3, and then the Steelers at 6-2. It's bad, George. The whole thing is bad. I know it's not the Bengal way, and for them to fire a coach,
right?
Especially midseason. I know it's not the Bengal way for them to pull on a short leash for a coach. but you have a franchise, maybe the best quarterback you're ever going to have for your franchise, and you're wasting prime years.
Well,
with a coach with an inept coach,
and you're not going to have. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with this T. Higgins situation, but I don't think they're going to have the same talent next year they have this year. I would be surprised if they do. And they're letting this thing slip away right now. And I don't know that, I don't know what they would do if they change coaches now and who you bring in and what happens. I don't see them doing that. I'm not sure. I'd like to think I wouldn't be in that situation to begin with, but I certainly don't see them doing anything in that regard. I just don't see it. It's not the Bengal way, and they're going to ride it out and live with the results. And right now, the results are not there for what the talent level of this team is. It's not even close.
If T. Higgins is a viable number 2 receiver who's playing only half your games because of injury, I'd take a guy who's a number 3 receiver, a backup, just the tier below, like however you make your tiers. If he's a second tier, I'd take a third tier guy who had no injury history over what T. Higgins has given us this season, simply because the best ability is availability. He's only there for I think he's only played in the 3 games we've won.
That's crazy. And
I'll have to check on that, but
I don't know what his value is either. Like if you trade him, I'm sure there's teams would love to have him. There's no question about it. But they're kind of going to end up eating this one too, like they have so many in the past where they, held on to somebody too long or didn't make it. It's just, I don't know, man. I don't like it. I don't know what they're going to do. But you're right. He's not healthy enough to pay that premium you would have to pay if you were going to bring him back.
Absolutely not.
Now, when he's out there, he's great. But, yeah, you got to be out there. And that's very disappointing that now not only did he miss this game, now we don't know what his status is for next week. He may not play again.
I'm also at the point where I'm ready to cut bait with a guy who's been around longer than even Zach Taylor. And maybe it's time to move on from Duke, because you've got a lot of premium draft picks that have not worked out at this point.
Right. No, I get where you're going there. It's funny because it seems like they go through these stretches where they're really hot in the draft, and then they go through 2 or 3 years where they're really cold in the draft. And maybe that's how it works with every team, but I've just noticed it with this one. It's like every time I'm like, dang, man, they are a good drafting franchise now, which they weren't for a long time. And it's like they figured this out. They've got a good plan. And then the minute I start thinking that, it goes the other way. And right now it's kind of gone the other way. And you're right. There's some high-profile picks that aren't bringing much to the table to help this team right now.
No, and if you're going to take project guys, at this point I don't think you can take project guys with your top 3 to 4 your third rounds 1 through 4. I would put a no-go on project guys at this point in time on any pick from 1 through 4. It feels like every year they've had 2 or 3 guys that are projects in that mix.
Yeah. And if there's something they could use right now, it's, we saw it Sunday where, Jalen Hurts had his way in that game. It was kind of like similar to the game we saw Saturday night. I mean, it's like he was having his way doing whatever the heck he wanted. He didn't have to worry about getting how many times did they sack him? Did they get him? But it's like there just wasn't enough pressure again. It was like what I saw Saturday night. It's like, and his numbers, he accounted for 4 touchdowns. There wasn't a lot of pressure. And, they've drafted for that, but it's not working. what, just not last year's draft, but the year before, they drafted a defensive end in the first round who
Miles Murphy, right?
hasn't given them much.
No sir. No sacks in that game for Jalen Hurts. He was not sacked at all. And
Yeah,
you're
I'm not
paying
even
him.
sure how many times he was pressured or under duress. And you look at him accounting for 4 touchdowns in that thing, and yeah, that was not pretty, and they got to get that figured out. And I don't know that they can with what's on hand.
You're paying an awful lot of money to a guy named Sam Hubbard, who he's had his moments here in Cincinnati. I understand, but for him to be paid as well as he is, you have to hit the quarterback, and if you're not, then you have to cut. You have to cut
Yeah,
bait.
he's been dealing with that injury, and I think that's definitely been a problem.
That
I think that
goes back to the best ability is availability, though.
right. Well, he's trying, but it's not happening. And I don't know if that's because of the injury. My guess would be yes, it is. He's a high motor guy, but
George, if that's your best option, though, injured,
correct,
and
correct,
then that's an indictment on what this team has put behind him in the depth.
correct. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And that's a situation they're in. And they dumped their money in him and Trey, and they tried to shore up the tackles, and they've had a little bit of a rotation there over the past couple of years, but man, the depth is just not there. There isn't any.
No, it's bad.
There's no difference makers that aren't on that field when they start the ball game. They have nobody else to bring in. And it's just, and you look at their last 4 drives in that game, because they got a touchdown coming out of the gate in the second half, and they don't punt the entire game, which amazed me when I thought of that later. But they didn't punt the entire game. But their last drives, they had the turnover on downs, they had an interception, they had a fumble, and then the last time they had it, there was not enough time to do anything. They were already buried and beaten.
It was
Jake
Browning.
It was just yeah, exactly. That's where they were in the game at that time. So yeah, it's terrible. It's just and just like that. There weren't a lot of drives in that first half of the Colorado game with UC. There weren't a lot of drives in this entire game. The Bengals' first drive, which was phenomenal. That was a great drive to start a game and put a touchdown on the board and take 10 minutes off the clock and do everything you probably planned to do the entire week when you were game planning for this. You would have said, I'll take that drive 100 times out of 100 to start a game. And then
you pissed down their leg.
That, it was tough finishing.
Yeah, they pissed down their leg, George.
And McPherson's not hitting field goals like he did, and he says he's hitting it as well as he ever has, and there's no problem with the process. But I don't know what's going on there. I heard a stat about his last several 50-plus yard attempts, and it's not working anymore.
Fans are saying, regardless of what he may have said, that the process is well. He said that in practice and before the game and all of that, he feels like he's a Pro Bowler. Fans have said that they were there during the pregame and halftime, and he was shanking stuff. The process wasn't there. He's just out here talking. I don't even know if he knows what he's saying.
Well, he's certainly not going to throw anybody under the bus. But when I saw his brother kicking against Kentucky the other night, I thought, daggone, maybe they'll draft him in a couple years or whenever he's eligible. But no, he's been really, really good for them, and he's going through it right now. I don't know what exactly it is, but that's another thing they got to figure out. I mean, that's something you thought, and we knew, with the new holder and that, there might be some, but I don't know if that's it. There's something going, and you thought that's something you wouldn't have to worry about all season long, and now here you are. It's an issue.
I know he did leave the game at one point. he went into the locker room. Now, whether that is because he had to use the restroom or because as a kicker, you're probably okay to go and do something like that at some point in time. But I know he did leave the field during play. But I don't know what's going on with that dude. He's a mess. But again, I don't know that there's much right now that I feel confident about. And it's going to take an awful lot for me to get off the hill of either one or both of Zach Taylor and Duke Tobin. At the very least, you have to take away the play calling from Zach Taylor because it's not there. It's not there.
Well, someone in that organization, and that would be Duke, is going to have that tough conversation. If you know, so someone's got to do something. They can't keep blowing these games like this when they have all this talent. But I feel like they're blowing the whole season. It's
yes.
It's totally on the brink now. I mean, as if it wasn't. And, everyone kind of half assumed that they would beat the Eagles, but that's a good team. You got Saquon Barkley. He had another nice game. That's 2 really nice games in a row for him. And my God, they had that going, that kind of yin and yang with him and Hurts doing their things. And then their receivers are good. And oh my God, that one, Hurts did make one big mistake. And I think they may have gotten a touchdown out of this drive anyway, but he hit the short guy. There were 2 guys running out to the right. A.J. Brown was so open. This was like in the red zone too. It's like from the 20-yard line. And A.J. Brown, and he just throws his I went back and watched it, and you see Hurts throw to the short guy and he was covered somewhat. And AJ's he will walk into the end zone if Hurts just lobs it to him. I don't know how he didn't see him. And Brown throws his arms up in the air. It's like, oh my God, I wonder what he's going to say when he gets back in that huddle. But I think they went ahead and scored on that drive anyway. In fact, I'm not sure if there's a drive they didn't score on. It seemed like they scored every time they had the ball, whether it was a field goal or a touchdown.
Well, I'm sure at the end of the game, he probably didn't care because winning fixes everything. And it's something this Cincinnati Bengals team has struggled to do. However, let's talk about a team that did win. FC Cincinnati won a game. They're in the playoffs. They're in the playoffs, George.
Yes, in the playoffs. Looked pretty good in that win last night. Got their defensive mojo back. Coach Noonan talked about that after the game, how he feels like they've strung a couple good games together that way, where they're getting things back to where they were earlier this season when they were really putting up some great defensive efforts. And so that bodes well for them. Best of 3 in this first round, and game 2 coming up Saturday at New York. And then we'll see if there's a third deciding game needed to be played back here in Cincinnati. But it would be exciting for them if they get that early season swagger back that they had and can apply that in the playoffs here. And maybe they can go on a pretty good run again like they did last year and provide some excitement in this city for sports.
That's the first 2-game win streak that Cincinnati has had, FC Cincinnati has had since August 1st and August 5th when they won consecutive games. The second of those consecutive games also came against NYCFC. Take that for what you will.
Yes.
But they do play again on November 2nd, and if necessary, again on November 9th. How do you feel that this team's going to do, though, against NYC overall? I mean, you've got one in hand.
Yeah, it's they've got to be heavily favored, I would think, to move on to the next round, given they got 2 shots to do it, one of them at home. I think they split with this team in the regular season. I can't remember offhand. I think that's right. So I feel good about their chances. I think I pretty much felt good about their chances all year. I thought they might get some of that early season mojo back. It took them a lot longer than I thought it would. I thought they would get it back before now, but it seems like they're playing much better now and getting out of guys what Coach Noonan wants out of them. And I've seen where he's an interesting guy. And I think he does a heck of a job. And it's funny how I'm not a soccer expert, but this guy just sees things and senses things and explains things really well for someone like me that maybe didn't grow up playing that sport, and especially not at a level like that. And I've got a lot of respect for that guy and what he's done, and a lot of trust in him. And he and that GM who worked together in Philly seem to be a great tandem. And so, I feel good about their chances to go deep in this playoff. I don't know, I not going to beat Miami. I don't know about Columbus because they started playing really, really well too. But they definitely could make some noise here. I'm pleased with where they're at.
Well, they are at plus 200 in this next game. NYC is at plus 120, and the draw, of course, at plus 270. So
I'm
we'll
not
see what
going
happens.
wrong.
There is some Reds news here this week, as Tito has made his first hire, bringing a familiar face back to the Queen City. Chris Valleca, come on down.
How about that? Maybe he can get these guys to cut down on strikeouts.
He was the hitting coach when Tito left Cleveland, and he is going to make the trip right down 71? Yeah. And come back to the team that brought him up from the minors.
Yeah, it's I mean, obviously he knows a lot about the Reds.
Sure.
He knows a lot about what they do. And this is what I like about it, because he came through that minor league system. And we've sat here and talked about, are they doing the right things at that level? Are these guys major league ready when they get up here? And are they doing the things, being taught the things? And Valleca is going to know. He's going to know what they do at these levels in the minors, and he's going to be able to institute some things that he wants done. And what I liked and what I read about his background is he gets guys to make contact. And I feel like the Reds have completely, now a lot of major league teams have completely gotten away from that. And you look at these, you look at this love of the long ball and all that, and I get it, but you still got to string hits sometimes. You're not always going to get the long ball. You've got to put the ball in play. I know it's old school and I'm old, and that's the old way of baseball, but I think they're too far away from that, though. The number of strikeouts this team was racking up this season is frightening. Absolutely frightening. And that's what he got to. I think that's job one for him.
The crazy thing is it's not just the Reds. It's baseball.
Right. Baseball's been trending in this direction for 10 to 15 years. I mean, that's, you looked at all these sabermetric things, and Adam Dunn would go up there and strike out 5 times out of 6 at bats, but he might have a homer or a walk, and then he'd have these great saber numbers, and it's like, how? The guy strikes out all the time. But
Adam Dunn would have been a Hall of Famer in today's era.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, but everybody kind of went that way. The whole game did. You're right. And if you got a bunch of, and I don't know,
he was ahead of his time.
Yeah, he was. He knew what he was doing. Dunner had it all down pat.
Big donkey, let's go.
He knew what he was doing. But I just feel like with what I've read about Valleca's background, the way the Guardians, they didn't have a great batting average, but they didn't strike out a lot. And so you're at least putting, and this is a team that can put pressure on defenses with the way they can run and stuff, but you got to kind of get on, or you got to put a ball in play that a guy has to charge in on and make a throw to first base when he knows Ellie or Matt McClain or whoever that can run fast is going down that line. It doesn't do you any good if you just take strike 3 and walk back to the bench. You're putting no pressure on the defense. And I think to me, that's what I hope job one for Chris Valleca is to get these strikeout rates down where they can put a little more pressure on these defenses with a roster that runs really, really well.
Well, and in a park like Cincinnati, especially as you get into those June, July, August, September months, and the air is a little bit different than it was in the spring. If you can get the ball in play, especially in the air, you might be cooking with gas.
Exactly. No, there's so many home runs go out during the summer months at Great American Ballpark where you watch these pitchers and they're just stunned that that ball left the park. But it happens all the time. And, that's definitely been part of the problem with getting some, the biggest problem is the Reds just don't pay the money for these big free agents. But it's also tough to get some of those guys, to come in here and pitch at Great American as a home park. It's kind of like the problem the Rockies had for a while too with that stuff. It's like you don't want to go there and throw a 5.6 ERA on your record for a season because you're pitching somewhere where the ball just flies out of the park. Just they definitely need, in my opinion, I know what Valleca's job should be, and I'm really, really happy that the new manager is being very proactive on all these things, it seems like every front. I was, first of all, I was surprised he came out of retirement to do it. I just thought he wasn't, but he seems fired up. Like, he doesn't just seem like, hey, oh, okay, I'll do it. I got nothing else going on. I feel better now. I'm retired, but my health's okay. Yeah, why not? I'll give it a shot. It doesn't seem like that at all. He's grabbing this thing by the throat and getting it done right out of the gate. And I love that.
Well, and just another example of that, the news that came out today, he's actually in the Dominican and he is visiting. He was visiting with Candelario, and he was I saw a picture of him in a room visiting with Candelario and Ellie and Noelvi Marte, and just making himself known to his players already because they're not here. They're down doing winter ball down in their respective countries and what have you, or different leagues down in the Caribbean. I don't recall a time when I've seen a skipper down in doing the elbow rubbing with his players at any point in time.
Yeah, no, that's big. That's huge. And he's that kind of hands-on. I don't want to say he's a player's manager because that's like a lot of people don't like that. But he does want to know these guys and he wants to know what makes them tick. And I hope he had a nice long sit down with Marte about what's important, how to succeed at the major league level. And maybe he went as far. I don't think he would go this far, but to say, I hope he did. You got to earn your spot, bud. Just because you're some hot prospect doesn't mean your butt's going to be in the starting lineup on opening day.
I hope the conversation went a little something like, hey, get a hold of me next week. We're going to have a sit down, whether it be via Zoom or whatever you want to do. And we're going to put together a plan for where we want you to be, what we want you to be doing, and how we want you to get there before we get to Arizona and are doing the spring training thing.
Yep, exactly. Because there's no question that's an untapped talent.
Absolutely.
That dude's got talent. It wasn't, and I know people are like, well, he was so good before because he was doing these PEDs and all. I think he's got talent, and he's still very, very young. So you don't throw him out, but you do get him on the right track. And I'm not sure he was on the right track. It sure didn't look like it by any stretch of the imagination, given that, he got his butt suspended for half the season, and then you come back and you play like he did. That wasn't a good look. And they've got to tap into that talent and help him maximize it because, again, they're set up to play some good baseball here the next few years, but I hope we're not having the same conversations about them that we're having about the Bengals right now with the season they're having. But hopefully Francona doesn't let it get to that point, and he does too. He seems like a guy that knows what he's doing, has done the right things, and has gotten the most out of his players. And the players do, whether he's a player's manager or whatever you want to call him, they do like playing for him.
We got a little extra time here, and I wasn't sure we were going to have this time, so I'm going to ask a last question going back to the Bengals. The trade deadline is in a week. We saw the Ravens make a trade today for a wide receiver, bringing in Deontay Johnson, who's no stranger to this conference as he came from the Steelers organization initially, went to Carolina. He's been around the league a little bit, but he's now a Baltimore Raven. I don't know why they trade for receivers because they have a running back at quarterback, but I digress. Right. In any case, we've seen Cleveland make some moves, largely moving people out. They're sellers, not buyers, because their cap is a mess anyway. And maybe they had their best quarterback at third string when the Bengals played.
How about that?
Jameis is wild, and listening to his, I just want him to stay around the league forever because his interviews are absurd. But so getting to the Bengals though, buyers or sellers, what would you do if you were GM, George? And what moves do you think this Bengals team should make?
You think I could go get Myles Garrett?
With what I would love for them to do it.
That's not going to happen.
They won't trade the draft capital that it would take. They won't because you're already striking out on enough draft picks that you can't really waste any of that draft capital.
Right.
And B, they don't have the cap space to sign their own guys, much less bring in a guy with that number.
I know, but that's the kind of difference maker you need to shake this thing up. It's not going to happen.
No,
it's not going to happen. I mean they should be buyers, but like you said, what are you going to do? And does it behoove them to move on from T right now? I don't know. I'm sure teams are calling and wanting to do something, but I don't see them doing anything. It's rare that
you bring that up, and his mom is no stranger to Bengals Twitter, and his mom put out a cryptic tweet right after the game where it was just the shrug emoji. And then she came back after the game. Well, after that tweet went entirely too viral, she deleted that tweet and said that tweet wasn't actually what you guys thought it meant, you dumb fucks. So I don't know what to make of any of that. With my tinfoil hat on, I'm wondering if T was even injured. But because you see guys like Devontae Adams get traded as soon as he says, I want to be traded, and he goes where he wants to go. Right. So it becomes a marriage of sorts with getting Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams back together. I'm just curious if I think T's time is well past the expiration date, truthfully.
It's unfortunate.
But do you cut bait at this point in time with everybody that you can and try and hit the rebuild button, or do you think you're still just only a couple pieces away?
Oh God, Aaron, I still believe they're probably closer than what they are. They certainly haven't shown it, but I can't. I mean, they go out and look at what they did in the offseason, though, and it looked like they made the right moves. And, you kind of got the safety room some help, but there hadn't been all that much help, I guess, in retrospect, but it looked like it. You got some defensive tackles to help out. You allegedly helped the offensive line, but none of this seems to be working. And I guess that goes back to your earlier point about the coaching staff. And so there's got to be, I'm telling you, you don't want to waste too much more time chasing what they have with this current window that is still open for them. So
it's far cheaper to make the move at the top with either a Duke Tobin or a Zach Taylor or both than it is to try and reshape your entire player personnel.
Yeah, and you're going to get quicker dividends too, usually, if it's the right guy. If it's the right guy, you see it all the time. A right guy comes in and
Detroit just did it.
Exactly. They sure did.
I am just terrified that right now we're actually in purgatory, and purgatory is far closer to hell than I am comfortable with.
It does feel that way. It does feel that way. But yeah, I think if I'm running that organization, I'm thinking more like we're talking than I would be reshuffling this roster. I mean, you've kind of, there's definitely some things they're going to have to do that I didn't think they were going to have to do player personnel wise, but nothing radical. I think the other thing is probably where you're going to get your quickest bang for the buck. But you got to find the right guy. They're out there. I mean, I got to think, and I know how it was in my business, and people, basically there is nobody in my business I couldn't get a good, solid, trustworthy report on within minutes. I could make a couple phone calls and find someone who knows this guy and say, would I want to hire him? What are strengths? What are we doing? I'd have the whole thing. Yeah. The NFL's got to be that. These guys got to know this guy's legit. This guy's a fraud. You got to know. And if you don't, then what have you been doing for the last however many years, 50 some years as owners of this franchise?
Yep. Tell me what's going on in high school, George, and we'll get out of here.
Hey, we got, final week of regular season in Kentucky. Ohio and Indiana both start playoffs this weekend. And so Ohio, what they did a few years ago, it used to be 8 teams a region make the playoffs. So it would be 32 teams. There's 4 regions in Ohio in each class. And there would be 8 teams in each region in the playoffs. Well, now it's 16. So you get some really bad matchups because you get 1 seed versus 16, 2 versus 15. There are just horrible. That's the one real flaw in this Ohio high school football system is the first round matchups are terrible. Now there's a couple in the middle, Elder Mason, pretty good first round matchup. Who else do we have playing this week in Division One? There were a couple games that stood out to me that I thought would be pretty good for the first round of Division One. Oh, Lakota East playing West Claremont. Those are pretty good games. But the rest of them, oh boy. And each division's the same way. You got a 1 seed playing a 16. So you'll have, say, a team like Moeller playing a team in the first round that has 1 win all season. Well, nobody around here has been able to really touch Moeller. So do you think a team with 1 win is going to give them a game? No. So I guess what I'm saying is the best games will start next week and the round after that. And then Kentucky will start playoffs next week. And I got to say this too. There's not a lot of good matchups in Kentucky on this week either because they're mostly out of their district play and all that. And so you're playing a 10th game and, a lot of teams stacked early and have a bye this week in the last week. Not all of them. There's still a lot of games in Kentucky this week, but if I were scheduling and I could do it, I would certainly get myself a bye week going into the playoffs, which to me is a great idea. I think the coaches who do that are pretty smart.
Well, there is a bye week next week, but there should be plenty to talk about next week as basketball tips off on Monday. The Bengals do play. Who are they playing this week?
This week they got the Raiders, the return of Marvin Lewis.
Yeah, and we'll see if Des Ritter gets in that game or not.
Yeah, how about that?
Trey Tucker back in Cincinnati as well.
Yeah. Saw him make a nice grab in the game the other day.
Yeah, some Bearcat sightings there. So there should be plenty to talk about with the Raiders game. 2 teams that collectively have 5 wins. Great job. You'll also have the FC Cincinnati playoff game to talk about. So there should be plenty going on. But that's another show in the books. Again, thank you to our sponsor, Remington Tavern. They can be found at
Yeah.
8892 Glendale Milford Road, 45140, where they have their daily happy hour from 3 to 7 p.m., $5 bourbon whiskey Wednesdays, bottle cap bonanza Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. You can check them out on Instagram at RemyTavCincy or follow them on Facebook. But for my co-host, George Vogel, I'm Aaron Smith. We'll be back here 9 o'clock next Tuesday to talk to you about all of your Cincinnati sports.